Have you ever felt like you are running faster than ever, yet the finish line keeps moving further away? No matter how many goals you reach, no matter how many boxes you check, something in you whispers that it is still not enough. It is as if you are chasing a horizon you will never touch. The harder you push, the more distant peace seems to become. What if freedom was not something you had to chase at all? What if it was something you already carried quietly, waiting for you to notice? This is the paradox at the heart of Zen. Unlike many traditions that begin by asking for faith, Zen begins by asking you to pause. It does not hand you a doctrine carved in stone. It does not demand that you accept invisible truths. Instead, it hands you a lantern and invites you to walk into your own life with your eyes open. The teaching is not about believing more, but about believing less until you finally step outside the cage of your own expectations. We live in a time of endless noise. Our phones demand attention the moment we wake up. News, opinions, and comparisons flood every corner of our days. We check messages at midnight, scroll past curated lives online, and silently measure ourselves against impossible standards. In this storm, we confuse activity with meaning. We run from one demand to another, but rarely stop to ask, what am I truly seeking? Zen meets us at this breaking point. It does not promise another achievement to add to the list. It whispers something different, that peace is not hidden in the future, but woven into this very breath. That liberation is not a destination, but the act of dropping what we never needed to carry. Imagine standing at the edge of silence, where the world's noise fades into the background. For a moment, there is no race to win, no image to maintain, no voice in your head demanding more. There is only the presence of being alive, raw and unfiltered. This is the doorway Zen opens. It is not an escape from reality, but a return to it. For centuries, people from every culture have discovered through Zen that the extraordinary hides in the ordinary. Drinking tea, walking across a wooden floor, feeling sunlight through a window. These moments are not interruptions in life. They are life itself. The secret is not to change them, but to see them clearly. Tonight, as you listen, you are invited to set down the weight of constant striving. You are invited to taste a freedom that does not need to be earned. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you already are, beneath the noise, the striving, and the fear. And so the journey begins here, not in a temple on the far side of the world, but in the simple truth that right now, in this very breath, you already hold the freedom you thought you lost. The distinct nature of Buddhism. When we look across the history of religions and philosophies, we notice a pattern that repeats itself. Most traditions anchor themselves in belief. They offer a set of sacred truths that must be accepted as the starting point. They tell us about a god or a pantheon of gods, about a soul or a destiny written in the heavens, about rituals and scriptures that are said to hold eternal authority. To enter such a tradition is often to accept these beliefs first, sometimes even without question, as the price of belonging. Buddhism, however, takes a radically different path. From the very beginning, the Buddha did not ask his followers to accept anything blindly. Instead of saying you must believe in a supreme being, he asked a far more daring question. What do you actually see when you pay attention to your own experience? He invited people to test his teachings as if they were running an experiment. Do they lead to less suffering? Do they lead to greater freedom? If yes, continue. If no, set them aside. This pragmatic approach made Buddhism unlike any religion that had come before. Imagine a traveler asking for directions. In most faith traditions, the answer might be something like, follow this map because it was given by the gods. Buddhism says something different. It hands you a lantern and says, walk. See for yourself where the path takes you. It does not deny the possibility of the divine, but it refuses to make belief the foundation. What matters is direct insight, not dogma. This distinction becomes clearer when we consider the way the Buddha himself responded to metaphysical questions. When asked about the creation of the universe, about the ultimate nature of God, or about what happens after death, he often remained silent. Not because he had no thoughts, but because he saw those questions as distractions. He redirected people back to the present moment, back to the reality of suffering and the possibility of liberation here and now. In this sense, Buddhism is less about constructing theories and more about dissolving illusions. Think of it as the difference between reading about water and drinking water. A book can describe water in elegant detail. It can tell you its chemical structure, its temperature, its flow, but none of that satisfies thirst. The Buddha's method was to give you the glass and say, "Drink." This attitude places Buddhism closer to science than to traditional faith. Science does not ask you to believe without evidence. It asks you to test, to observe, to measure. In a similar way, Buddhism tells you to observe your mind, to notice the arising of thoughts, the flow of emotions, the impermanence of everything you cling to. The evidence is not written on tablets of stone, but in the constant stream of your daily life. Consider a simple exercise. Pay attention to your breath for a few moments. As you watch, you will notice that no breath stays. Each one arises and fades away. This is not a matter of belief. It is something you can see directly. From such an observation, the Buddha drew a profound truth. Everything is impermanent, and suffering comes when we cling to what cannot last. No divine authority is required to confirm this. The proof lies in your own body, in your own awareness. This approach is one of the reasons why Buddhism has spread across so many cultures and adapted so seamlessly. In India, it drew upon existing spiritual traditions, yet reshaped them into a practice of mindfulness and compassion. In China and Japan, it merged with Taoist and Confucian thought, expressing itself through Zen tea ceremonies, poetry, and calligraphy. In the West, it resonates with people who may not believe in any god, but who are hungry for a path of peace and clarity. The flexibility of Buddhism comes from this very core. It does not insist on belief, it insists on experience. Let us pause and ask, why is this distinction so important for our time? In the modern world, many feel alienated from religion because they cannot accept its supernatural claims. They struggle with the idea of miracles, heaven and hell, or divine intervention. Yet these same people often hunger for meaning, for a way to handle stress, for a practice that makes life more whole. Buddhism answers by offering a path that does not require one to sign a contract of faith. You can be agnostic or even atheist and still find in Buddhism tools for living with greater awareness and compassion. This universality explains why mindfulness has become such a global movement. At its heart, mindfulness is simply the application of Buddhist principles, stripped of ritual or dogma. To sit quietly, notice your breath and observe your thoughts is to engage in a practice that Buddhists have refined for centuries. You do not need to believe in rebirth to feel the calming effect of awareness. You do not need to accept the cosmology of 6 realms to understand the suffering that comes from craving and aversion. At the same time, calling Buddhism purely scientific would be too narrow. While it values observation, it is not just about collecting data, it is about transformation. The Buddha was not a philosopher sitting in a library. He was a human being who walked out of his palace, confronted sickness, aging, and death, and refused to look away. He asked a human question, why do we suffer? And he pursued an answer not in theories but in lived experience. The power of Buddhism is that it offers a method anyone can test, and if practiced sincerely, it changes the way we see ourselves and the world. Another way to understand this distinctiveness is through the metaphor of a raft. Imagine you are standing on the bank of a river, and on the other side lies freedom. The Buddha said that his teachings are like a raft to carry you across. But once you reach the other shore, you do not carry the raft on your back, you leave it behind. This shows that even Buddhism itself is not to be clung to. The teachings are a tool, not a prison. Contrast this with other traditions, where scripture or dogma must be defended at all costs. In Buddhism, the very act of attachment even to the teaching itself can become another chain. This attitude has profound consequences. It creates a tradition that is both humble and resilient. When Buddhism enters a new culture, it does not say, your way is wrong. It asks, how does suffering appear here, and how can we work with it? This openness explains why Buddhism has taken so many forms, from Tibetan chanting to Japanese Zen gardens to Western mindfulness retreats. At its core, it is not about conforming to one culture, but about liberating the human mind wherever it is found. This also explains the phrase often used, the religion of no religion. On the surface, it seems contradictory. How can something be a religion if it denies the very framework of religion? But the point is not to reject spirituality. The point is to remind us that any form, even the form of religion itself, can become an obstacle if we mistake it for the goal. Zen especially emphasizes this. To meet the Buddha on the road, as one master said, is to kill him. Not literally, of course, but symbolically. It means letting go of every attachment, even to the image of the Buddha himself, so that you can see reality directly. For people in the United States, Canada, and Europe, this aspect of Buddhism holds a special appeal. Many are skeptical of institutions, yet hungry for authentic experience. They distrust dogma, but long for guidance. In Buddhism, they find a tradition that does not say, "Believe because we tell you to." Instead, it says, "Look, test, see for yourself." This speaks to the modern mind that values evidence and personal freedom. Yet Buddhism is not simply another lifestyle trend. It is not just a way to relax before bed or reduce stress at work. At its heart, it challenges us to see the illusions we live under. It asks us to notice how we cling to wealth, to status, to identity, as if these were permanent. It asks us to recognize the suffering that comes from this clinging and to imagine the possibility of living differently. The difference then is not small. It is the difference between a tradition that demands belief and one that demands honesty. Buddhism does not give you an answer to recite. It gives you a mirror. Sometimes what you see is uncomfortable. You notice your own fears, your own desires, your own constant restlessness. But in that honesty lies the seed of freedom. In this way, the distinct nature of Buddhism is not abstract. It touches the very core of daily life. When you are anxious about the future, Buddhism asks you to come back to this breath. When you are trapped in anger, it asks you to observe how the fire burns inside you and to see that it is consuming you more than anyone else. When you are lost in endless wanting, it asks you to notice the fleeting nature of every satisfaction. This is not belief. This is direct observation. And through such observation, something remarkable happens. Slowly, the chains of belief and disbelief, of craving and aversion begin to loosen. You begin to taste a freedom that is not given by any authority and cannot be taken away by any circumstance. It is the freedom of seeing clearly. This is why Buddhism stands apart. It is not about adding another layer of faith on top of your life. It is about peeling back the layers until you discover what was always there. A peace that is not dependent on conditions. A freedom that is not earned but recognized. This is the heart of the religion of no religion, and it is the gift that Buddhism continues to offer across centuries and cultures. The journey of the Buddha, from palace to Bodhi tree. To understand why Buddhism speaks with such clarity about suffering and freedom, we must return to the life of the man who began it all. Long before he was known as the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama was simply a young prince raised within the protective walls of privilege. His father, a king in what is now Nepal, dreamed of securing for his son a destiny of power. To ensure this, Siddhartha was sheltered from the harsh realities of the world. Inside the palace gates, he lived among music, beauty gardens, and endless feasts. Every comfort was provided, every sorrow hidden. But the walls of luxury are never high enough to keep out the truth of human existence. At some point, every person, no matter how sheltered, must confront what lies beyond comfort. Siddhartha's turning point came when he finally ventured beyond the palace. There, outside the golden safety of his childhood, he encountered three sights that would change him forever. An old man, frail and bent, a sick man writhing with disease, and a corpse lifeless and silent. In that moment, the illusions of permanence shattered. No amount of wealth or status could protect against age, illness, or death. For many, such realizations are pushed aside with distraction. We tell ourselves it will not happen soon, or that perhaps it will not happen to us in the same way. Siddhartha could not look away. He saw the universal law of suffering written on the faces of strangers, and something inside him refused to return to ignorance. He recognized that the world, as glorious as it seemed, was threaded with pain that no palace walls could hide. The fourth sight, however, offered hope. He encountered a wandering ascetic, a man who had renounced possessions and status in search of spiritual truth. This figure showed that there might be another path, one that faced suffering directly instead of denying it. Inspired, Siddhartha made a decision that would shock his family and alter history. He left the palace, his wife, and his newborn child. To some, this act seemed cruel, but to Siddhartha it was necessary. He was not rejecting them out of indifference. He was stepping into the unknown out of compassion, determined to find a way to break the chains of suffering for all. Thus began his great journey. For years, Siddhartha sought teachers and practiced disciplines that pushed his body to the edge of death. He joined groups of ascetics who believed that denying the body through extreme fasting, sleeplessness, and exposure to pain could open the door to enlightenment. He starved himself until he was little more than skin and bone, so weak that he nearly collapsed in a river. Yet even in this extremity, liberation eluded him. The more he punished the body, the clearer it became that suffering alone could not lead to freedom. It was in this moment of near death that Siddhartha experienced his first great insight, that neither indulgence nor denial brings peace. To live in endless pleasure is to be enslaved by craving. To live in endless pain is to be enslaved by aversion. Both are chains of the same prison. What is needed is a middle way, not the indulgence of the palace, not the torture of the ascetics, but a path of balance. This middle way would become the foundation of all his later teaching, but it began as a simple act of compassion toward himself. A young village girl offered him a bowl of rice milk. In accepting nourishment, Siddhartha allowed himself to live. His companions abandoned him, mocking his return to food as weakness. Yet in truth, it was strength. For the first time, he was no longer ruled by pride or the need to prove his worth through extremes. He had begun to let go. Soon after, Siddhartha sat beneath a great fig tree, later called the Bodhi tree, and resolved not to rise until he had discovered the truth. Night after night he meditated, facing the waves of desire, fear, and illusion that arose in his mind. The legends say that Mara, the personification of delusion, sent visions to distract him, seductive women, terrifying armies, storms, and whispers of doubt. But Siddhartha did not turn away. He simply observed, recognizing that each vision was only a passing thought, unable to bind him unless he clung to it. This act of deep observation, of remaining still in the face of every temptation, was his second great insight. He realized that suffering is not only created by what happens to us, but by how we respond. When we grasp at pleasure, it slips through our fingers. When we resist pain, it grows stronger. When we see both with clarity and let them pass, the mind rests in freedom. As the morning star rose, Siddhartha's meditation broke through the final veil. He saw that all things are impermanent, that clinging leads to suffering, and that what we call the self is not a fixed entity but a flow of changing processes. He awakened to the interconnection of all life. From that moment, Siddhartha became the Buddha, the awakened one. Yet enlightenment did not end his journey. It began another. The temptation to remain in bliss and silence was strong, but the Buddha chose differently. Out of compassion, he spent the next 45 years teaching others how to walk the path he had discovered. He offered no promises of salvation from above, no demands for belief in mysteries unseen. Instead, he offered a method: observe, test, see for yourself. This story, retold for centuries, is not just the biography of one man. It is a mirror of our own lives. Each of us begins in some version of a palace, whether built of comfort, distraction, or ignorance. Each of us at some point encounters old age, sickness, and death, reminders that our world is fragile. We may try to deny them, to build higher walls, or to numb ourselves with pleasure, but sooner or later reality calls. The question is whether we turn away or step forward. The Buddha's departure from his palace can be seen as the moment we stop pretending and begin seeking. His years of ascetic struggle reflect the ways we try to solve suffering by going to extremes, working ourselves to exhaustion, chasing perfection, or rejecting the world entirely. His discovery of the middle way points to the wisdom that true freedom lies not in excess or denial, but in balance, in seeing clearly without clinging. And his meditation beneath the Bodhi tree is not simply an ancient tale. It is a practice available to anyone. To sit quietly, to face the restless thoughts, to observe the temptations of desire and fear without being swept away, is to walk the same path. The awakening of the Buddha was extraordinary, but the method he used is profoundly ordinary. Sit, breathe, notice. Do not cling, do not resist. Watch as the storm of the mind passes, leaving the stillness that was always there. For people today in America, Canada, and Europe, this story carries a fresh resonance. We too live in palaces of distraction, surrounded by screens, comforts, and endless entertainment. Yet depression and anxiety rise, proving that comfort alone cannot shield us from suffering. We too swing between extremes: overwork and burnout on one side, escapism and numbing on the other. The Buddha's insight that both indulgence and denial fail to bring peace is as relevant now as it was 2.5 millennia ago. To walk the middle way today might mean balancing ambition with rest, technology with presence, solitude with connection. It might mean accepting nourishment without shame, as Siddhartha did with the rice milk, recognizing that compassion for the self is the beginning of compassion for others. And to sit even for a few minutes and watch the mind without judgment is to taste the same freedom that dawned beneath the Bodhi tree. The journey of the Buddha is thus more than history. It is an invitation. His palace is our comfort zone. His sights of age, sickness, and death are the truths we prefer to avoid. His years of struggle are our own failed attempts to control life. His middle way is the wisdom waiting for us when we release extremes. And his awakening is the reminder that liberation is not found in distant heavens but in the present moment, clear and unadorned. Through this journey, the Buddha embodied the core difference of Buddhism itself. He did not claim authority because of divine revelation. He claimed authority because he tested reality in the laboratory of his own life. And what he discovered he shared not as doctrine but as a path that anyone could walk. The story continues to echo because it is not only about him, it is about us. It asks whether we will remain in our palaces of distraction or step out to face reality. It asks whether we will exhaust ourselves with extremes or rest in balance. And it offers the possibility that if we sit still long enough with honesty and courage, we too can glimpse the freedom he found. Desire and suffering, the root of human restlessness. The story of the Buddha's awakening leads naturally to one of the most important insights he shared: the connection between desire and suffering. If his journey showed us that neither indulgence nor denial leads to freedom, his teaching on desire explained why. To understand this, we do not need abstract philosophy. We need only to look honestly at the way our own lives unfold. Think for a moment about the last time you longed for something. It might have been a new phone, a job promotion, a romantic relationship, or even a simple slice of cake after a long day. Before you obtained it, your mind was restless, pulling you toward that object of desire with a promise of happiness. When you finally received it, there was a brief sweetness, a sense of satisfaction. But how long did it last? Soon the mind shifted to something else, another goal, another craving. The cycle repeated. This is what the Buddha observed so clearly: desire by its very nature can never be satisfied. It is like a fire that no matter how much fuel you throw into it continues to burn. For every dream fulfilled, another arises. For every moment of pleasure, another hunger appears. We are like children trying to lick honey from the edge of a knife. The sweetness is real, but so is the wound that follows. In our modern world, this truth is magnified. Advertising, social media, and consumer culture thrive on keeping us in a constant state of wanting. We are told that the next purchase will bring fulfillment, the next achievement will secure respect, the next vacation will finally bring rest. Yet once we arrive, the promise fades, and we are left reaching again. The treadmill never stops. In fact, it speeds up, because the more we get, the more we expect. The Buddha did not say that desire itself is evil. He did not condemn the natural longing for food, shelter, or love. What he pointed out was the illusion built into desire. We imagine that satisfying it will bring lasting peace, but it never does. Peace is not found in satisfying every craving, but in understanding the nature of craving itself. To see this clearly, consider the experience of aging. A young person may spend years chasing beauty, admiration, and vitality. As time passes, wrinkles form, hair grays, and strength declines. No matter how much money is spent on creams or surgeries, the tide of impermanence continues. If happiness depends on staying forever young, suffering is inevitable. The Buddha taught that this grasping for what cannot last is the very definition of dukkha, a word often translated as suffering but more accurately described as a sense of unsatisfactoriness of things never quite fitting the way we wish. Even when desires are noble, the cycle remains. Parents wish for their children to succeed. Artists wish for recognition. Workers wish for security. These are understandable and often compassionate wishes. But when the mind clings too tightly, disappointment becomes unavoidable. Children make their own choices, sometimes painful ones. Recognition fades as quickly as it comes. Security is shaken by forces beyond our control. The more we demand permanence from impermanent things, the deeper our frustration. The Buddha illustrated this with a vivid metaphor. He compared life to a wheel endlessly turning through 6 realms of existence. Whether one imagines these literally or psychologically, the lesson is the same. In the realm of hungry ghosts, beings with tiny mouths and vast bellies wander endlessly, never able to fill themselves. This is the image of insatiable desire. We have all tasted this realm when we devour pleasures yet remain empty inside. The wheel spins and we find ourselves restless once more. What then is the way out? The Buddha suggested not repression nor indulgence, but observation. Instead of running toward or away, pause and look at desire directly. Notice its arising in the mind. Notice the promise it whispers. Notice how it fades the moment it is fulfilled. In that clarity, a shift occurs. You begin to see desire not as a command, but as a passing wave. You can choose whether to act or not. Modern psychology confirms this insight. Studies on dopamine reveal that much of our excitement comes not from obtaining a reward, but from anticipating it. The rush is strongest when we imagine what it will feel like, but once we have it, the brain quickly returns to baseline. The Buddha recognized this long before neuroscience gave it language. Our minds are wired to chase, but chasing never ends. The only true freedom comes from stepping outside the chase. This does not mean abandoning life or rejecting joy. On the contrary, when we release the grip of desire, joy becomes more accessible. Imagine drinking a glass of water when you are thirsty. If your mind is restless, you may gulp it down without noticing. If your mind is calm, you taste the coolness, the refreshment, the miracle of something so simple. Desire blinds us to the beauty already present. Letting go allows us to see it. Aging provides another example. When we cling to youth, growing older seems like loss. When we release the clinging, aging can reveal dignity, wisdom, and depth. The lines on a face become not scars of defeat, but records of experience. A person who has lived without being deceived by endless craving grows more radiant with time. In death itself, there can be peace instead of terror, because nothing is clung to so desperately that its loss destroys us. This teaching challenges us in profound ways. It asks us to notice how much of our lives are spent in the grip of wanting. We want recognition, comfort, security, love, distraction, achievement. None of these are wrong, but our belief that they will complete us is mistaken. The Buddha invites us to test this directly. The next time you long for something, pause. Ask yourself, will this truly bring peace? How long will the satisfaction last? Already you begin to loosen the chain. In North America and Europe, where consumer culture is powerful, this insight could not be more timely. We live surrounded by abundance, yet rates of depression and anxiety are high. People possess more than kings of the past, yet remain restless. The message of the Buddha cuts through this paradox. Fulfillment is not purchased. It is not achieved by climbing higher. It is realized when the grip of craving relaxes. Zen Buddhism carries this teaching further, showing that when we release desire, ordinary life shines with extraordinary clarity. The act of sweeping a floor, of washing a dish, of walking through a quiet street can be complete in itself. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be taken away. This is liberation not in some distant paradise, but here and now, in the very texture of daily life. Perhaps the most radical aspect of this teaching is that it does not offer escape from suffering through supernatural reward. It offers freedom within suffering by transforming our relationship to it. Desire promises happiness but binds us tighter. Observing desire loosens the knot. Letting go sets us free. This is not easy. The habit of chasing is ancient and strong, but each moment of awareness plants a seed. Each time we notice instead of react, the fire burns a little less fiercely. In the end, the Buddha did not ask us to stop desiring altogether. He asked us to see desire for what it island, a wave, a spark, a movement of the mind. When seen clearly, it loses its power to control us. And when that happens, we begin to taste a peace deeper than satisfaction, a joy that does not depend on constant reaching. This is the heart of his insight. Suffering is not caused simply by pain or loss, but by the craving that clings to what cannot last. The cure is not found in gaining more, but in loosening the grip. In this release lies a freedom that cannot be bought or stolen. It is the freedom to live fully in this moment, to see beauty without needing to own it, to love without needing to possess, to live without fear of losing. The 6 realms of existence, maps of the human mind. If the Buddha's teaching on desire revealed the root of suffering, his vision of the 6 realms of existence revealed the many faces that suffering takes. In the ancient texts, these realms are described as literal worlds, where beings are reborn according to their karma. But the brilliance of Buddhism is that it does not require us to believe in other dimensions to find meaning. The realms are also profound psychological metaphors, maps of the mind that show how desire, anger, ignorance, and craving shape our experience right here and now. Imagine life as a great wheel, endlessly turning. At the top are the gods, radiant beings living in bliss, and at the bottom are beings trapped in hells of torment. Between them lie the hungry ghosts, the animals, the humans, and the titans. Whether we see them as cosmic landscapes or inner states of consciousness, the message is the same. As long as we are caught in the grip of desire and aversion, we keep spinning on the wheel, sometimes rising, sometimes falling, never at rest. Let us explore each realm as it applies to our daily lives, not as myth, but as mirrors. The God realm appears to us in moments of triumph and pleasure, when life seems perfect, when our desires are met, when success lifts us above ordinary struggle. We taste this realm. Perhaps it is the exhilaration of winning an award, falling in love, or reaching a long-sought goal. Everything feels golden. Yet the danger of this realm is complacency. Pleasure fades, and when it does, we are unprepared. Many who rise high in wealth or power believe they have reached permanence, only to fall with shock when time strips away what they clung to. The God realm teaches us that bliss without awareness is fragile, that even the highest peak eventually slopes downward. Next is the realm of the Titans or Asuras. These beings are filled with jealousy and conflict. They are always comparing themselves to the gods, striving to climb higher, yet never satisfied with their place. We enter this realm whenever we burn with competition, when envy drives us, when the success of another feels like an insult to our own worth. Social media amplifies this realm as endless comparisons keep us locked in struggle. The Titan realm reminds us that envy is another form of desire, one that poisons achievement with bitterness. The human realm, according to Buddhism, is unique. It is neither the bliss of the gods nor the torment of the hells. It is a mixture of joy and sorrow, a realm of balance that allows for awakening. We live here now with enough suffering to drive us to seek meaning, but enough stability to practice awareness. This realm is precious because it offers the chance to break free of the wheel altogether. The human condition, with its struggles and possibilities, is seen not as a curse but as a rare opportunity. Then comes the realm of the hungry ghosts, beings with enormous bellies and tiny mouths, forever starving yet never satisfied. Psychologically, this realm is our endless dissatisfaction. We taste it when we binge on food, entertainment, or consumption, but feel empty inside. Addiction of every kind belongs here, whether to substances, shopping, approval, or attention. The hungry ghost realm is the embodiment of craving with no fulfillment. Many people in the modern world know this realm intimately, though they may not call it by this name. The animal realm represents existence driven by instinct and ignorance. In this realm, beings act without reflection, seeking only survival, food, and reproduction. In our lives, we fall into this realm when we act on autopilot, when we numb ourselves with routine, when fear or desire controls us without thought. This realm is not about animals themselves, but about the part of our mind that forgets awareness and lives mechanically. Finally, the hell realms are states of extreme suffering. In Buddhist texts, there are hot hells of burning and cold hells of freezing, but the essence is the same. These are states of intense rage, despair, or pain. We touch this realm when we are consumed by hatred, when grief paralyzes us, when anger blinds us to compassion. These moments may not last forever, but when they grip us, they feel eternal. What unites all 6 realms is impermanence. None of them lasts forever. We rise and fall through them, sometimes in the course of a single day. A morning may begin in the bliss of the God realm, a compliment lifting our mood. An hour later, envy places us in the Titan realm as we see a colleague praised more. By afternoon, hunger for recognition makes us like a hungry ghost, and by evening, frustration or exhaustion drags us into a private hell. At night, in moments of simple awareness, we return to the human realm where clarity is possible. This fluidity shows that the wheel is not about distant afterlives, but about the present. We are reborn constantly, not just after death, but in every thought, every shift of mood, every craving that carries us into another state. The teaching of the realms is not meant to frighten us, but to awaken us. If we can see where we are, we can choose differently. If we can notice envy rising, we can soften it with gratitude. If we can recognize the hungry ghost's craving, we can pause and breathe instead of feeding it blindly. Awareness is the key to stepping off the wheel. Zen masters often describe enlightenment as liberation from the wheel itself. Whether bound by golden chains of pleasure or iron chains of suffering, bondage is bondage. True freedom lies not in climbing to the highest realm, but in seeing that the wheel itself is an illusion created by craving. The moment we stop clinging, the wheel loses its hold. For modern audiences in America, Canada, and Europe, the six realms resonate in surprising ways. The God realm mirrors the pursuit of status and luxury, the belief that success will solve everything. The Titan realm reflects the culture of competition and comparison. The hungry ghost realm describes consumerism and addiction. The animal realm points to our tendency to live without reflection, scrolling endlessly through distractions. The hell realms echo the epidemic of anger, depression, and despair. And the human realm reminds us that despite all this, we have the rare gift of self-awareness and the capacity to awaken. The genius of the Buddha's map is that it does not condemn us to any realm. It simply shows us where we are and why. Each realm is a mirror, and once we recognize ourselves in it, we can begin to loosen the grip of desire and aversion. We may not escape the wheel instantly, but with each moment of clarity, we step closer to liberation. Consider again the metaphor of the wheel. If we are trapped on it unconsciously, we spin endlessly, rising and falling without control. But the moment we see it as a wheel, the moment we understand its mechanics, we stand apart. We realize that we are not the wheel itself, but the awareness that observes it. From that awareness, a new possibility opens. Instead of endlessly chasing the next realm, we can walk away. This is why the teaching of the six realms is not merely a cosmology, but a psychology. It is a way of naming the storms of the mind. By naming them, we see them. By seeing them, we are no longer ruled by them. In this sense, the six realms are not distant mythic lands, but everyday mirrors that reveal where we stand in each moment. The Buddha's wisdom in presenting them was not to bind us to belief in invisible worlds, but to free us from the invisible prisons of our own desires. When we know that craving leads to the hungry ghost, that envy leads to the Titan, that rage leads to hell, and that presence leads to the human realm, we gain a compass. We begin to navigate life not blindly, but with understanding. And with understanding comes freedom. The illusion of the separate self. The six realms of existence show us how desire and aversion shape the shifting landscapes of our minds. Yet, behind these movements lies a deeper illusion, one so fundamental that it colors everything we experience. It is the belief in a fixed and separate self. According to the Buddha, this belief is not only mistaken, but also the root of much of our suffering. To grasp this teaching is to approach the very heart of Buddhist insight. At first glance, the idea that the self is an illusion seems absurd. After all, here I am thinking, breathing, making choices. I feel the boundaries of my skin. I know my memories, my name, my story. How can the self not be real? Buddhism does not deny our existence. It does not say we are empty shadows. What it challenges is the assumption that we exist as independent, permanent entities, untouched by the flow of life around us. Consider a wave in the ocean. It rises, takes shape, crests, and falls back into the sea. For a time, we can point to it and say, there is a wave. But is it ever truly separate from the ocean? Its form depends on countless conditions: the wind, the tide, the pull of the moon, the depth of the water. The wave is real, but it has no independent existence. In the same way, what we call the self is a pattern of conditions constantly changing, never isolated. Modern science echoes this insight. Neuroscience shows that the brain is not a single unified entity, but a network of processes constantly firing and interacting. Psychology reveals that our sense of identity shifts depending on context and memory. Biology reminds us that every cell in our body is in flux, replaced over time, sustained by food, air, and water that come from the world outside us. Who we are is not an isolated island, but a momentary pattern within a vast system. The Buddha taught this truth through the doctrine of anatta, often translated as non-self. He invited his followers to examine the 5 aggregates that make up a person: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Look at each, he said, and ask, is this permanent? Is this truly me? Form, the body ages and changes. Sensation arises and fades. Perception shifts. Thoughts come and go. Consciousness itself flickers with each moment. None of these can be held as a fixed self. Together they create the appearance of a person, but none is the essence of I. Why does this matter? Because clinging to the illusion of a fixed self traps us in fear and craving. If I believe I am an unchanging entity, then aging becomes terrifying. Death becomes the ultimate annihilation. Insults strike at my very essence. Loss feels like the destruction of who I am. But when I see that the self is fluid, interdependent, and impermanent, fear softens. Aging becomes transformation rather than loss. Death becomes a return to the ocean from which the wave arose. This does not make us powerless. On the contrary, it makes us more alive. If the self is not fixed, then we are not bound by past mistakes or permanent flaws. We can change. We can grow. We can release old identities and step into new ways of being. The illusion of a solid self binds us. The recognition of interconnection frees us. The Buddha often illustrated this truth with simple metaphors. He compared the self to a chariot. If you dismantle a chariot, where is the chariot itself? It exists only as the arrangement of wheels, axles, and wood. Remove the parts, and the concept disappears. In the same way, what we call I is the arrangement of body, mind, and conditions. Without them, the idea of a permanent self vanishes. Another metaphor compares the self to a flame passed from one candle to another. Is it the same flame or a new one? It depends on the perspective. Identity is like that flame, a continuity without a fixed essence, a process rather than a thing. For audiences in America, Canada, and Europe, this teaching can be unsettling because modern culture prizes individuality. We are taught from childhood to build a strong self, to define ourselves through career, possessions, achievements, and personal brands. To hear that the self is an illusion feels like an attack on everything we value. But Buddhism is not saying that individuality is worthless. It is saying that clinging to it as ultimate truth blinds us to our deeper reality. We can enjoy individuality as we enjoy a wave or a flame without mistaking it for permanence. Think of relationships. When we see ourselves as separate relationships, become contracts between two fixed entities. When we see ourselves as interdependent relationships, become the meeting of flows, the dance of conditions. Love becomes less about possession and more about recognition. Compassion becomes natural because we see that others are not truly separate from ourselves. The teaching of non-self also reshapes how we view responsibility. If I am separate, I may believe my actions affect only me. If I am interdependent, I see that every word, every gesture ripples through the web of life. My kindness nourishes not only others but also myself. My cruelty wounds not only others but also myself. Awareness of interconnection deepens both compassion and accountability. Zen expresses this insight with striking simplicity. A famous saying declares, "Before enlightenment, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. During practice, mountains are no longer mountains, and rivers are no longer rivers. After enlightenment, mountains are mountains again, and rivers are rivers again." At first we take the world and ourselves at face value. Then we realize that all is interconnected and fluid, and the ordinary seems to dissolve. Finally, we return to the ordinary, but now with the deep knowledge that what seems separate is in truth part of one great whole. This realization does not require retreat to a monastery. It can be touched in daily life. When you breathe, remember that the air was given by trees. When you eat, remember that the food grew from earth, rain, and sunlight. When you speak, remember that your language is inherited from generations before you. Nothing you do is isolated. You are not a separate self, but a thread in a vast tapestry. To see this is not to lose your identity, but to expand it. One story captures the essence of this teaching. A monk once asked the master, "What is the self?" The master pointed to the bamboo outside the window and said, "There it island." The monk asked again, "What is the self?" The master pointed to the sound of the wind. The lesson was clear: the self is not a fixed thing within, but the living interplay with everything around us. The illusion of self, then, is not simply a mistake of thought. It is the foundation of our grasping. We cling to possessions because we believe they reinforce who we are. We cling to status because we think it defines us. We cling to opinions because they seem to protect our identity. But when we see that the self is not fixed, we can loosen our grip. We can let go of possessions, status, and opinions without losing ourselves, because there is no fixed self to lose. What remains is freedom. In the West, where anxiety about identity is strong, this teaching offers relief. We do not need to perfect an image of ourselves. We do not need to cling to a single version of who we are. We can embrace change, contradiction, and growth. We can meet life as a process rather than a performance. The Buddha's insight into non-self was not abstract philosophy, but a path to liberation. When we see through the illusion, fear softens, compassion deepens, and freedom opens. We realize that the wave does not end when it falls, that the flame is not lost when it passes, that the chariot never existed apart from its parts. What we thought was separate is already one. This is not a denial of existence. It is a richer existence. It is life lived without the prison of I and mine. It is life lived as flow, as connection, as awareness. And it is in this life, here and now, that the Buddha invites us to awaken. The middle way and dialectical teaching. The teaching of non-self challenges the very ground on which we usually stand. It tells us that what we cling to as permanent is shifting, that the boundaries we defend so fiercely are in truth porous. For many, such revelations feel destabilizing. How do we live in a world where nothing is fixed, where desire endlessly disappoints, and where the self itself is fluid? The Buddha's answer was not to retreat into despair or to build new dogmas. His answer was the middle way, a path that avoids extremes and cultivates balance. The middle way first appeared in the Buddha's own life. His years of extreme indulgence in the palace had left him unsatisfied. His years of harsh self-denial had nearly killed him. Neither offered peace. Only when he accepted the bowl of rice milk from a village girl did he glimpse the possibility of another path. That simple act of nourishment was not a retreat from spiritual discipline, but a recognition that life itself cannot be approached through extremity. To cling to pleasure is a chain, but to cling to pain is also a chain. Freedom comes not from either, but from balance. This teaching was not meant only for monks or seekers in ancient India. It is as relevant now as it was then. In modern life, we constantly swing between extremes. We work ourselves to exhaustion, then collapse into distraction. We pursue perfection in body, career, or image, then give in to despair when we cannot sustain it. We consume endlessly, then try to purge ourselves through rigid discipline. In each case, the pendulum swings but never rests. The middle way reminds us that liberation lies not in swinging harder, but in stilling the pendulum. What makes this teaching especially powerful is its dialectical nature. The Buddha did not present truth as a rigid doctrine. He responded to people where they were often giving apparently contradictory teachings to correct their imbalance. When someone clung to the idea of happiness, he spoke of the inevitability of suffering. When someone obsessed over suffering, he pointed to the possibility of peace. When someone believed in a permanent self, he taught non-self. When someone fell into nihilism, he reminded them of continuity and responsibility. His words were like medicine, changing according to the illness of the listener. This flexibility is one of the hallmarks of Buddhism. Truth is not a static formula to be recited. It is a living dialogue between teacher and student, between seeker and life itself. Zen later carried this to an extreme, answering profound metaphysical questions with remarks about the weather or gestures that shattered the student's expectations. A master was asked, "What remains when the world is destroyed by fire?" He answered, "It is windy again this morning." In that moment, the student was jolted out of abstract speculation and returned to the immediacy of experience. The middle way, then, is not only about moderation, it is also about cutting through habitual patterns of thought. Our minds love dualities, good and bad, self and other, pleasure and pain, existence and non-existence. We cling to one side and reject the other. The Buddha's dialectical approach undermines these dualities. He shows that truth often lies not in choosing sides, but in seeing beyond the division. Suffering and peace, self and non-self, permanence and impermanence are not opposites to be chosen, but aspects of a deeper reality to be recognized. To understand this, think of a musician tuning an instrument. If the string is too tight, it snaps. If it is too loose, it produces no sound. Only when it is balanced does it create music. The Buddha used this image to describe the path of practice. Discipline is necessary, but harshness destroys. Compassion is essential, but indulgence weakens. Balance allows both structure and freedom, both effort and ease. This principle can be applied to every aspect of life. In relationships, clinging leads to control, while detachment leads to coldness. The middle way is intimacy without possession, care without suffocation. In work, obsession leads to burnout, while apathy leads to stagnation. The middle way is engagement without enslavement, ambition without addiction. In spirituality, blind faith leads to superstition, while rigid skepticism leads to emptiness. The middle way is openness tested by experience, humility guided by inquiry. Western audiences often struggle with extremes because modern culture glorifies them. We celebrate the workaholic who sacrifices everything for success, the ascetic who gives up all comfort, the competitor who never rests. Yet beneath the celebration lies exhaustion and despair. The middle way offers a radical alternative. It tells us that we do not have to break ourselves to be worthy, nor do we have to drown in indulgence to find joy. We can live in balance, fully alive yet free. The dialectical method also reveals a deeper truth about language itself. Words can never capture reality fully. Every statement points in a direction, but risks becoming a trap if clung to. That is why the Buddha sometimes remained silent when asked metaphysical questions. Silence was not ignorance, but wisdom. By refusing to answer, he prevented his listeners from mistaking words for reality. This is why Zen speaks of pointing directly to the mind beyond words and letters. The middle way includes knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to guide and when to allow space. A story from Zen illustrates this vividly. A student asked a master, "What is the essence of Zen?" The master handed him a teacup. The student asked again, "What is the essence of Zen?" The master handed him the cup with the blade of a knife resting across it. The student said, "Please give me the other end." The master replied, "What would you do with the other end?" In this exchange, no explanation was given, yet the student was forced to confront his assumptions. The middle way is not always about comforting answers. Sometimes it is about unsettling questions that open new awareness. This dialectical spirit is especially important in a world that craves certainty. Political debates demand clear sides. Social media rewards absolute statements. We are pressured to choose and defend extremes. Yet life is rarely so simple. The middle way invites us to dwell in complexity, to resist the temptation of easy answers, and to discover wisdom in nuance. It teaches us that holding balance is not weakness but strength, that remaining open is not indecision but clarity. Practicing the middle way does not mean avoiding commitment. It means committing without clinging. It means acting with compassion and purpose but without the illusion of permanence. It means working for justice while knowing that injustice may never be fully eradicated and yet not despairing. It means enjoying pleasure without needing it to last and enduring pain without being consumed. Ultimately, the middle way is a way of being present. It is not a compromise between extremes, but a liberation from them. It is walking a path where every step is grounded, not in desire or fear, but in awareness. This awareness allows us to meet life as it is, not as we demand it to be. In that meeting lies freedom. The Buddha's dialectical teaching and his emphasis on balance continue to resonate because they are not confined to any time or culture. They speak to the universal human condition, whether in the noise of ancient marketplaces or the constant ping of digital notifications. The challenge is the same: to find clarity in the midst of extremes, to see through dualities, to walk the middle way. Zen and the direct, pointing to reality. The middle way shows us how to avoid extremes and live with balance. But the Buddhist tradition did not stop there. As the teachings traveled across Asia, they took new forms, and none has captured the imagination of the world more than Zen. Zen is often described as the most direct expression of Buddhism. It does not waste time with elaborate theories or complicated rituals. Instead, it cuts straight to the heart of experience, pointing directly to reality itself. The origins of Zen can be traced to India, where the teachings of the Buddha began. Centuries later, the monk Bodhidharma carried a special transmission to China, where it became known as Chan. Eventually, it traveled to Japan, where it took root as Zen. While shaped by the cultures it passed through, Zen retained the same essential focus to awaken people to the truth of their own minds beyond words and doctrines. What sets Zen apart is its radical simplicity. Other forms of Buddhism may involve chanting elaborate ceremonies or deep philosophical study. Zen, by contrast, emphasizes direct practice. The classic image of Zen is not of a scholar debating scripture, but of a monk sitting quietly in meditation. This practice, called zazen, or just sitting, is deceptively simple. One sits, breathes, and pays attention. Thoughts arise and pass, but the practitioner does not chase them. There is nothing to achieve, no special state to grasp. The practice is simply being present. At first, this can feel frustrating. We are used to striving to setting goals and measuring progress. In Zazen, there is no progress to measure. The very act of trying to achieve enlightenment becomes an obstacle. As Zen teachers often say, the harder you try to become a Buddha, the further you move from awakening. This is because awakening is not about becoming something else. It is about seeing clearly what already island. To help students break through the habits of thought, Zen developed unique methods. One is the use of koans, paradoxical questions or statements that defy logical answers. Famous examples include, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" or "What was your original face before your parents were born?" Such questions cannot be solved by reason. They exhaust the analytical mind, forcing the student into a direct encounter with reality beyond concepts. The purpose is not to frustrate, but to free. When the mind lets go of trying to solve, a deeper awareness can emerge. Another method is the spontaneous gesture or response. A master might answer a philosophical question by raising a finger, shouting, or striking the floor. To an outsider, such actions may appear absurd, but their purpose is to jolt the student out of conceptual thinking. Instead of explaining reality, the master points to it directly, using action rather than words. The student is left with no theory to cling to, only the raw immediacy of experience. This directness reflects the essence of Zen. Reality cannot be captured in words. It must be seen and lived. As one Zen saying puts it, the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. Scriptures, teachings, and rituals are like fingers pointing. They are useful, but if we mistake them for the moon itself, we miss the truth. Zen insists on turning the gaze away from the finger and toward the living reality that words can only suggest. This emphasis on the ordinary is one of Zen's most striking features. Unlike traditions that place enlightenment in distant heavens or future lives, Zen finds it in the simple acts of daily life. A classic saying declares, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." The activities remain the same, but the awareness changes everything. Washing dishes, drinking tea, or walking across a garden become opportunities for awakening when approached with presence. This spirit also shaped Zen's artistic expressions. Zen influenced Japanese calligraphy, where a single brushstroke could reveal the state of the artist's mind. It shaped gardens where stones and raked sand evoke vast landscapes in simple forms. It shaped the tea ceremony, where every movement becomes a meditation on simplicity and impermanence. These arts embody Zen's aesthetic of wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection and transience. A cracked bowl or weathered rock is not a flaw, but a reminder that all things pass, and that imperfection itself can be a gateway to truth. For audiences in the West, Zen holds a particular appeal because it resonates with the desire for authenticity. Many people in modern America, Canada, and Europe are skeptical of institutions and rituals. They want a practice that does not demand belief in doctrines, but offers a direct encounter with peace. Zen answers this longing. It says you do not need to believe in distant gods or memorize sacred texts. Sit down, breathe, pay attention. In that simplicity lies everything. Yet Zen is not easy. Its simplicity can be more challenging than complex rituals. When there is no scripture to hide behind, no elaborate ceremony to distract, you are left face to face with your own mind. Every restless thought, every craving, every fear arises in silence. Zen practice is not an escape from the mind, but a confrontation with it. Over time, however, this confrontation reveals something extraordinary. The storms pass, and beneath them lies a stillness that was always present. This stillness is not something you create. It is not a reward for effort. It is the natural state of awareness itself. Zen practice strips away the noise until this truth becomes undeniable. In that recognition, enlightenment is not a distant goal, but a realization of what has always been true. One story illustrates this directness. A monk asked his master, "What is Zen?" The master replied, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The monk protested, "But everyone eats and sleeps." The master said, "Not everyone eats when eating or sleeps when sleeping." The lesson is clear. Most of us live distracted, lost in thought, never fully present. Zen is the art of presence, of living each moment as it is, without adding or subtracting. Another story tells of a monk who asked for the essence of Buddhism. The master pointed to a flower blooming by the path. No explanation, no philosophy, just the living presence of beauty. That gesture conveyed more than 1,000 words could. Zen's power lies in its refusal to complicate. In a world filled with noise, distraction, and endless striving, it calls us back to simplicity. To sit quietly, to drink tea with awareness, to notice the sound of rain, to breathe fully. These are not trivial acts. They are gateways to awakening. For the modern West, where life moves at relentless speed, this message is revolutionary. We are taught that fulfillment comes from doing more, achieving more, consuming more. Zen says the opposite. Fulfillment comes from being present with what already island. Liberation is not found in chasing, but in stopping. Not in adding, but in letting go. The direct pointing of Zen is not anti-intellectual. It does not reject knowledge, but places it in perspective. Knowledge can describe the world, but only awareness can experience it. The map is useful, but it is not the journey. Zen reminds us again and again to walk the path, not just read about it. Ultimately, Zen is not about mastering techniques or accumulating insights. It is about living. It is about waking up to the ordinary moments that make up our days and seeing them for what they are, extraordinary expressions of reality. In that awakening, nothing changes, and everything changes. The dishes are still dirty, the floor still needs sweeping, the body still aches. But awareness transforms these tasks into sacred acts. Life itself becomes the teacher, and every moment points directly to truth. Zen arts and ordinary life. When we speak of Zen, it is tempting to imagine monks meditating in remote mountains, or masters answering riddles in dimly lit halls. Yet Zen has never been confined to monasteries or temples. Its spirit has always flowed into the fabric of daily life, shaping how people see, create, and engage with the world. Zen is not only about sitting still in meditation. It is about living every moment with awareness, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. Nowhere is this clearer than in the arts that Zen inspired, and in the simple rhythms of everyday existence. One of the most striking contributions of Zen to culture is its influence on aesthetics. In Japan, Zen shaped calligraphy, garden design, tea ceremonies, and even architecture. These are not arts created for display or entertainment alone. They are practices of mindfulness. A Zen calligrapher does not merely paint characters with ink. Each brushstroke is an expression of presence. The pressure, the flow, the pause, every movement reveals the state of the artist's mind. A line drawn in distraction trembles and hesitates. A line drawn in clarity flows with effortless strength. In this way, the art becomes a mirror of awareness. Zen gardens offer another example. Unlike elaborate gardens designed for abundance, a Zen garden often uses only a few stones, raked sand, and sparse plants. Its simplicity invites reflection. The empty spaces are as important as the elements themselves. Visitors are not overwhelmed by color or noise. Instead, they are drawn inward, encouraged to contemplate impermanence and stillness. To sit in a Zen garden is to be reminded that emptiness is not lack, but space, the silence in which meaning arises. The tea ceremony embodies Zen in perhaps the most intimate way. At first glance, it is simply the act of preparing and drinking tea. But within Zen culture, this act became a ritual of presence. Every gesture is deliberate, from the way water is poured to the way cups are placed. The host and guest meet not in the pursuit of luxury, but in the appreciation of simplicity. The tea is not about taste alone, but about attention. To drink tea in this manner is to pause, to slow down, to honor the moment. In a world that constantly pushes us to rush, the tea ceremony teaches the radical act of being here now. What links these arts is the Zen aesthetic known as wabi-sabi. This is the appreciation of imperfection, impermanence, and simplicity. A cracked tea bowl is not discarded but treasured, for its flaws reveal the passage of time. A weathered piece of wood is valued for its natural beauty. Wabi-sabi reminds us that nothing lasts, nothing is perfect, and nothing is finished. Rather than seeing this as a tragedy, Zen sees it as the source of beauty itself. To accept imperfection is to align ourselves with reality. To resist it is to suffer. This perspective has profound implications for everyday life. Most of us live in cultures that prize perfection, whether in appearance, performance, or possessions. We polish, upgrade, and compete, believing that flawlessness equals value. Zen turns this on its head. It tells us that imperfection is not failure, but authenticity. A wrinkled face is not a loss of beauty, but a testament to years lived. A scar is not shame, but memory. A crooked path is not inferior to a straight one, but an invitation to walk slowly and notice more. Zen does not ask us to abandon the ordinary, but to see it differently. Washing dishes, for example, is often treated as a chore, something to be rushed through so we can return to what really matters. But from a Zen perspective, washing dishes can be a meditation. The feel of water, the rhythm of movement, the simple act of care, these are not obstacles to life, but life itself. The same is true for sweeping a floor, folding clothes, or cooking a meal. When done with awareness, each becomes a practice of presence. This approach transforms how we relate to time. We often divide our days into moments that matter and moments that do not. We rush through the latter to reach the former. Zen dissolves this division. Every moment matters, because every moment is life. There is no waiting room where real living begins. The ordinary is already extraordinary when seen with clear eyes. A famous haiku by the poet Basho captures this truth. It describes an old pond, a frog jumping in the sound of water. Nothing dramatic happens, yet the poem has echoed for centuries. Its power lies in its simplicity, in the way it reveals the vastness of reality through the smallest of events. Zen poetry and art do not aim to impress with grandeur. They aim to awaken us to what is already here. For people in America, Canada, and Europe, this message carries a quiet revolution. Modern life is filled with speed, noise, and distraction. We are encouraged to multitask, to measure success by productivity, to seek constant stimulation. In such a world, the idea that folding laundry or drinking tea could be a gateway to peace feels almost absurd. Yet this is precisely why Zen speaks so strongly today. It reminds us that fulfillment does not lie in adding more, but in noticing what we already have. Zen arts also reveal how creativity and spirituality can merge. In Western thought, art is often seen as separate from daily life, a domain of professionals or geniuses. Zen dissolves this boundary. Everyone can live artfully. The way you arrange flowers on a table, the way you cook a simple meal, the way you write a letter, each can be infused with awareness and beauty. Zen democratizes art by showing that it is not about mastery alone, but about presence. This does not mean Zen ignores skill or discipline. A tea master trains for years. A calligrapher practices endlessly. But the goal is not perfection in the conventional sense. The goal is to embody presence so fully that each act flows naturally. In this way, discipline and freedom merge. The form becomes a container for spirit, and within that container, spontaneity blooms. The integration of Zen into ordinary life also challenges the notion that spirituality requires withdrawal. Instead of rejecting the world, Zen embraces it. Eating, working, walking, speaking, all are opportunities for awakening. This is why the greatest Zen teachers often appear utterly ordinary. They do not glow with supernatural aura or perform miracles. They chop wood, carry water, drink tea, and write poems. Their ordinariness is itself the mark of enlightenment, for they have seen that nothing needs to be added to make life sacred. Perhaps the deepest lesson of Zen arts and ordinary life is humility. When we learn to value imperfection, we stop demanding that life conform to our desires. When we learn to see beauty in simplicity, we stop chasing endless novelty. When we learn to honor the ordinary, we discover that meaning has always been here, waiting in the smallest gestures. Imagine a quiet morning. You sit at a wooden table, steam rising from a cup of tea. Outside, rain falls, gently tapping against the window. You lift the cup, feel its warmth, taste its simplicity. In that moment, nothing more is needed. This is Zen. not in a temple, not in a philosophy book, but in the direct experience of living. The double bind and Zen practice. As we explore Zen's way of bringing awareness into the ordinary, one final challenge emerges, a paradox at the heart of practice itself. It is the challenge of the double bind. In Zen, the double bind refers to the way the very effort to attain enlightenment can prevent enlightenment from arising. It is the strange tension between striving and letting go. To walk this path, one must engage fully yet not cling to the goal. This paradox is not a mistake in the teaching, but a deliberate feature designed to push us beyond ordinary patterns of thought. Consider the seeker who comes to Zen with the sincere desire to awaken. They sit in meditation day after day, counting breaths, silencing distractions, waiting for the moment when awakening will strike like lightning. Yet the harder they try, the more elusive it becomes. They imagine enlightenment as a state of bliss, a prize to be earned, a destination to reach. But every grasping thought, "I want to awaken, I must achieve this, I need results," reinforces the very illusion that Zen seeks to dissolve. The more they chase it, the further it slips away. This is the essence of the double bind. You cannot force awakening, yet you cannot abandon practice either. You must walk the path, but the path cannot be walked as a means of control. Zen responds to this dilemma not by offering neat solutions, but by deepening the paradox. Teachers give koans that cannot be solved, riddles that collapse under logic. They instruct students to sit without seeking, to practice without a goal. These instructions feel impossible, but that impossibility is the point. They short-circuit the mind's usual habits of control, opening the door to a new way of being. A famous story illustrates this. A monk asked his master, "How do I attain liberation?" The master replied, "Who is binding you?" In that instant, the question turned back on the seeker. Liberation is not something gained, but something recognized. The chains were never real. The double bind exposes this truth by making us wrestle with the futility of grasping until we finally let go. Letting go, however, is not passivity. Zen practice requires discipline, but the discipline is of presence, not achievement. When you sit in meditation, you are not working toward a future goal. You are practicing being here moment by moment. If thoughts arise, you let them pass. If discomfort arises, you breathe with it. The practice is not about becoming, but about being. And in that simple act of being, the very thing you were chasing reveals itself. This paradox extends beyond meditation into all of life. Think of sleep. The more you try to force yourself to sleep, the more restless you become. Only when you release the effort does sleep come naturally. Enlightenment, Zen teaches, is much the same. It is not forced by will, but allowed by surrender. Yet surrender is not laziness. You must prepare the conditions, create quiet, cultivate awareness, sit regularly, so that awakening has space to arise. The balance between effort and release is the essence of practice. The double bind also exposes the limits of language. To say seek enlightenment implies that it is separate from you. To say do not seek implies that you should give up. Both are incomplete. Zen transcends this by leading you into direct experience. Words point but cannot capture. Instructions guide but cannot deliver. Only when you encounter your own mind without filter does the paradox resolve itself, not through explanation but through realization. Western psychology has recognized similar patterns. Therapists speak of paradoxical intention, where the patient is encouraged to embrace the very thing they fear breaking its hold. For example, someone with insomnia might be told to try to stay awake. The pressure lifts and sleep arrives. In the same way, Zen invites us to stop clinging to awakening, and in that release, awakening dawns. For people in America, Canada, and Europe, this paradox resonates deeply. We live in cultures obsessed with achievement. We measure life by goals, milestones, and results. Even spirituality becomes another project. 10 steps to happiness, 30 days to mindfulness, a program for peace. Yet this mentality itself becomes the obstacle. Zen cuts through by saying, stop turning awakening into a product. Sit, breathe, be. The paradox unsettles us because it resists our culture's addiction to control, but it also frees us, reminding us that the deepest truths cannot be grasped as possessions. Teachers throughout Zen history have used this paradox as a tool. Some respond to questions with silence, forcing the student to confront their own seeking. Others shout, strike, or laugh, shaking the student out of expectation. These methods may seem harsh, but their purpose is compassion. They aim to break the grip of striving to free the student from the trap of treating enlightenment as another possession. One story tells of a monk who asked, "What is the way?" The master replied, "Ordinary mind is the way." The monk asked, "Should I direct myself toward it?" The master said, "If you try to direct yourself, you will go astray." The monk asked, "If I do not try, how can I know the way?" The master answered, "The way is not about knowing or not knowing. Knowing is illusion, not knowing is confusion. When you truly see, it is like the vast sky, open, boundless, clear." The monk was stunned, and in that moment the truth of the paradox became clear. The double bind also carries a profound ethical dimension. When we strive too hard to be good, compassionate, or wise, we risk turning those qualities into performances, masks, to protect our self-image. Zen practice reminds us that true compassion arises naturally when we stop clinging to self. True wisdom emerges not from striving to be wise, but from seeing clearly. The paradox humbles us. It shows that the qualities we seek are not products of willpower, but expressions of awareness. Living with this paradox requires patience. The modern mind craves quick results, but Zen invites us to dwell in the space of not knowing, to sit with questions that have no answers, to practice without guarantees, to rest in uncertainty until clarity emerges by itself. This patience is not resignation, it is trust. Trust that the ground of reality is already whole, that awakening is not far but near, not distant but present. The double bind, then, is not a barrier but a gate. It teaches us to exhaust the mind's illusions until we surrender to what has always been true. It dismantles our need for control until presence shines through. In this way, the paradox is not a problem to solve, but a path to walk. Each time we feel the tension of striving, we are being invited to release. Each time we fall into grasping, we are being pointed back to letting go. Zen practice, with all its simplicity, embodies this. Sit in meditation, not to achieve, but to be. Walk through life, not to possess, but to experience. Work with discipline, but without clinging. Love deeply, but without trying to control. In this way, the paradox becomes not a frustration, but a teacher. It shows us that freedom lies not in escaping tension, but in living through it with awareness. Ultimately, the double bind reveals the heart of Zen enlightenment is not something we create, but something we uncover. It is not separate from us, but woven into our very being. We do not become Buddhas. We awaken to the truth that we already are Buddhas, hidden beneath layers of striving and illusion. The paradox dissolves when we see that there was never anything to chase, only something to notice. This is why Zen has endured for centuries, and why it continues to speak to seekers today. It offers no easy answers, no guaranteed formulas. Instead, it offers a path that is both demanding and liberating, a path that leads us to confront our deepest illusions and release them. In doing so, it leads us not away from life, but into it, fully present, fully awake. As we reach the end of this journey through the heart of Zen and Buddhist thought, a pattern emerges. Every teaching we have explored, whether it is the truth of desire, the 6 realms of existence, the illusion of self, the middle way, the direct pointing of Zen, the integration of art and ordinary life, or the paradox of the double bind, has pointed us toward the same realization. Freedom is not hidden in distant heavens, nor is it trapped in elaborate theories. It is here in this very breath, in this very step, waiting to be noticed. The Buddha's first insight was that suffering arises from clinging. Desire pulls us from one realm to another, trapping us in endless cycles of dissatisfaction. But he did not stop at diagnosis. He offered a path, a way of loosening the grip of craving and returning to the simplicity of being. The 6 realms remind us that our states of mind shift constantly, that we are reborn in envy, joy, despair, and longing from moment to moment. To see this is to gain clarity, to begin to step off the wheel. From there, we encountered the radical truth of non-self. What we call I is not a permanent entity, but a flow of conditions like a wave on the ocean. To cling to the illusion of permanence is to live in fear. To recognize impermanence is to live with freedom. The middle way then showed us how to embody this truth, avoiding the traps of indulgence and denial, clinging and rejection. Balance is not weakness, but strength, the strength to live without being bound by extremes. Zen carried these teachings to their most direct expression. No longer confined to words or rituals, Zen invites us to encounter reality as it is through meditation, through art, through the smallest acts of daily life. A cup of tea, a line of ink, the sound of rain on a roof, these become doorways to awakening when entered with awareness. Zen teaches us that the ordinary is sacred, that nothing needs to be added for life to shine. And then comes the paradox, the double bind. The harder we strive for enlightenment, the further we push it away. Yet the answer is not to abandon practice, but to let go of grasping, to sit, to breathe, to live without clinging, until the truth reveals itself as what has always been present. What then is the invitation for us? It is not to become scholars of philosophy or collectors of spiritual ideas. It is to live differently, to meet each moment with awareness, to recognize craving when it arises and release it, to honor imperfection as beauty, to find balance in a world of extremes, to allow ordinary life to become the canvas of awakening. The call is simple but demanding. Do not wait for another life, another place, another moment. The path is here under your feet. The practice is now in your breath. The truth is not elsewhere but within the life you are already living. Step into it with open eyes, open hands, and an open heart.